link that the followers of the Murex bring as a raya that the Murex is the Chilazon Techeles is from the word that you find historically in Latin and Greek. The Murex is called the parpura. Parpura. It's the name of the snail, which in certain writings of Pliny the Elder happens to be that the word parpura is used, but it's used for a different snail. But in Aristotle and in others, the word parpura is spoken about when he speaks about the Murex. In modern Hebrew today, I believe also parpura is called the snail. They refer to it as the parpura. In the Targum, when the Chacham were Targum the Torah to Yavanis, they have that Targum today. And in that Targum, it's interesting that when it says the word Techeles, it translates it into Aramaic or Greek. It translates it into parpura. So if parpura is this snail which you use to dye the Murex, and the Targum in Yavanis translates the Techeles in the Torah as parpura, so it seems like there's a very logical link between the parpura and between the Techeles. Rabbi Hertzog brings this raya, but he immediately dismisses it. And he says that if you look in the rest of the Targum over there, you'll see that every other time, it is true that one time, when it mentions Techeles, it translates it as the parpura. But in every other case where it says the word Techeles, even in the same parak itself, where it says many other times the word Techeles, it is not referred to as the parpura, but it's referred to in the Targum translated into the Yakintas, as that would be the translation of Techeles. And the parpura in the rest of the Targum is always used not for the Techeles, but for the argamon. Whenever it says argamon, which we usually understand means purple, that's where the Targum consistently refers to it as the parpura, which makes sense, because if the parpura taka, like you see in the ancient writings, was referring to the Murex, and in the olden days, kepshuta, it's ungenommen. I mean, there are others that argue that they didn't know how to produce from this snail. They couldn't produce blue, so they produced purple from it, which is kishmai keinu, parpura. The word purple, some suggest, comes from the word parpura, because that's the dye that they used from that snail used to produce purple. And that is in the rest of the Targum is translated for the Targum of Argamon, which is purple. So that raya of Hertzog says is not really a raya that he's masking to. However, in the Chumash of Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, he brings another raya also that links the word parpura to the Techeles of Titus. And that is a Ravya. Ravya was a Rishon, and Brachis Simchaf Hey brings down on the Mishnah that says, from when could a person start saying Krishma in the morning? It's a machlekes whether ben Techeles lelavan or ben Techeles lekarsi. Ben Techeles lekarsi. Now, you assume always that Techeles is blue and karsi is green. So when it gets light enough outside, that a person is able to discern and see the difference between something which is blue and something which is green, which has to be a little bit lighter, obviously, than to see the chilik between blue and white. Blue and white you could see much earlier. But between Techeles and Karsi, it's a little bit later in the morning. And the Mishnah says that at that point, you could start saying Krishma. And on that, the Rav Yo says, he has a Yerushalmi. Now this Yerushalmi that he brings down, we don't have today. But the Rav Yo had this Yerushalmi, and many times Rav Yo has brought down that he quotes Yerushalmis that obviously we never made it to our Yerushalmi. But he says the Garsin of Yerushalmi on that Mishnah, ben Techeles lekarsi. What does it mean ben Techeles lekarsi? Ben parfifin, parfirin, lepri uben pimpinin. That means between, when you can see the difference between purpirin and prefinin, which is Zokte Rav Yovahu Me'il. It's a robe, shekayrin the Lashon Laz, which in Latin is called porphyra. So it seems to be that he's using the word Techeles and Karsi, and he's using Techeles and equating Techeles with porphyrin. And he says from when you can see the difference between porphyrin and pripinun, that would be like seeing the difference between Techeles and between Karsi. So Techeles in this Mishnah, which l'chayr is a Techeles of the tzitzis. Others want to argue it doesn't mean anything to do with that. It's just a color which could have been produced from something else. But okay. But it says between. So Techeles over here in this Mishnah, the Rav Yo brings down Yerushalmi, translates it as porphinin, and porphinin is Pashas parpura, which is the muric snail. So that l'chayr is a link that connects the two together, and they bring this as one. The Lubush Aharon brings this, and many others bring this as a raya. Now, those want to be matchit that it's not a raya, b'chlal, because the etzem is you have to understand the Yerushalmi, in the time of the Yerushalmi, they still had Techeles. They were wearing Techeles then. So they knew what Techeles meant. They definitely knew what the color Techeles was. So why would the Yerushalmi tell you that you want to know what color to look for when you're trying to discern between the color of Techeles and Karsi, instead of just saying everybody knew what Techeles was in those days, everybody knew what Karsi was green, so just keep it that way. Why do you have to give me another thing? So it would seem that and not only that, it's giving names in different languages, in Latin and Greek. It's like basically saying blue and green in Latin and Greek. When in the whole meantime, everybody in those times in Eretz Yisrael knew what it meant Techeles and knew what it meant Karsi. So what seems to be is that they want to say that what the Yerushalmi is trying to do over here is not translating Techeles into porphyrin and Karsi into pripinun. That's not what it's doing. What it's doing is it's trying to describe to you that the same color distinction that you could tell at that time in the morning between what they knew as Techeles and Karsi, but apparently it was not everybody was able to tell. To get a Karsi, you have to get a Karsi, you have to get a leek, you have to get these things. Maybe it was more easier, and therefore they said that the same distinction that would be is hard to tell in that time in the morning between blue and green would be between porphyrin, and between pripinun. And what does that mean? Porphyrin, like we said before, is purple. That's what the Targum, most of the time in the Targum of the Greek Targum says, that Techeles is, that Argamon is parpura. And the other word that the Yerushalmi brings down, which is pripinun, it's not clear what that word means. Pashtus, it should equal to Karsi, which is green, but there's zero Mikairis that it means green. They're not sure what it means. But there is a word in Latin which is very similar to it, and it's called perfinia, and that is a robe with at the bottom of the robe has a hem, like a border around it of purple. And so therefore, what they say is that ben porphinin means purple. It means if you have a robe of purple, and there's a hem around it, which is usually, you could see a difference between the hem and the actual beged itself. It's usually much stronger around the edges. And so it's pretty close in color, but it's still different. And so therefore, the Yerushalmi is trying to say that if you want to know if you want to be able to see, and you don't have, let's say, for some reason, you don't have Techeles and Karsi, so the Yerushalmi would be saying that you could see the same time in the morning, you'd be able to distinguish between the two colors of a robe that's purple with its rim around it. That could be a pshat in the Yerushalmi. Many go with that. Others have different dichuyim. But the raya is not necessarily a raya. Like I said, they don't know that pripinun means anyways Karsi. Porphyrin in the Targum always means argamon, which is purple. So to say that over here means blue would be a shtickle of a daichik. Rav Asher Weiss, when they showed him this raya from the Rav Yo, he was tamazei matchet b'shtei yadai, didn't want to deal with it. He said that you can't bring a raya from words, from linguistic raya of things that were mentioned in ancient writings 1,000 years ago. He says these things always change. He says our Torah HaKadosh, which we guard, mamish with Mesiras Nefesh on every single word of the Torah. And he says, and how many times is there different nuschayos and different girsayos and things that we find out were not accurate, and that's after guarding it mamish like we guard the Torah. You can't bring a raya from a word that somebody wrote thousands of years ago, which happens to have been that it was retranslated, and they don't even have necessarily the Pliny and Aristotle. They have a translation of a translation, and things zikr not a raya. So there were two rayas that porphyra means the murics. One raya was from the Targum Shivim, and one was from the Yerushalmi brought down from the Rav Yah, and both of them do not.